Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, starring award-winning real estate coaches and #1 international best-selling authors, Tim and Julie Harris. This is the #1 daily radio show for realtors looking for a no BS, authentic, real-time coaching experience. What's really working in today's market, how to generate more leads, make more money, and have more time for what you love in your life. And now your hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
Welcome back. It's Tim and Julie Harris, and thank the good Lord that it's Friday because Julie and I get to talk about whatever the heck we want to talk about.
That's right.
That's right. And remember, this is our Freeform Friday show. We actually have never really come up with a really good name for this, for the Fridays.
Fun Friday, freeform, anything goes, all of that.
Yeah, exactly. So we talk about whatever we have been talking about. And we share with you some of the things that we find fascinating. And we also share with you some real estate stuff, but also in addition to that, questions and answers and all kinds of different things. So interestingly enough, Fridays have become these podcasts have become some of our most, I think, positive feedback to podcasts. You guys really like it. And you guys like it when Julie and I talk about truly bizarre things. You know, maybe we need to talk about aliens more or something like that, Julie. By the way, whatever happened to all those stories on the aliens?
I know. We're going to have to resurrect some of that. Find out. I guess they've been suppressed by all the other crazy news that's going on.
Yeah, I get the aliens were going to invade, I guess, and they found out about the tariffs. They said, no way, that just is wackadoo. Yeah, Trump needed to pass a tariff on aliens. That would have fixed that problem. Exactly. So look, we have some very specific topics that we're going to talk with you guys about today, but don't be surprised if we meander and just focus on whatever's top of mind. We want to do these Friday shows so that the essence of the feeling that you have is that you guys are having this conversation along with us, and we're all sitting around someplace, and we're all just sort of having these random conversations that interest all of us, and just go back and forth and have fun. So that's really the focus. And the first topic we have, Julie and I wrote down 4 topics, but the first topic that we have is something that's not necessarily a fun topic, but something that's really important that you are clear about. And this is always these types of things. I have to say, I'm going to start out with, this is kind of like the good news, bad news thing. So we're going to start out with the bad news, and the rest of it's going to be good news for the rest of today's show. And by bad news, I mean, it's kind of a negative thing, but I think it's important that you, dear listener, dear viewer, are really tuned into some of the, I think, really evil, and there's the word I use, misinformation that's out there about housing. So Julie, hopefully I teed you up.
Yes. Well, I think that you are referring to a little chart that was floating around last week, especially, I believe it started online in different social media last weekend and then got some legs by Monday. Housing Wire, Logan Motoshami has reported on this quite a bit because he actually is a housing data analyst, unlike people who sometimes pretend to be on X or Instagram or all the different places. And the chart, and you guys can see it on Housing Wire. I don't think we can post it, but there's a chart on Housing Wire that made it look like foreclosures were just absolutely spiking. It looked Julie, crazy, right?
You stepped over a couple important details. Housing Wire was calling out the article that was floating around on the internet as a lie. Okay, yes. Housing Wire was not the bad guy here.
No, they were calling it out.
Right.
That's
and
right.
The chart was from Freddie Mac, and the chart was reporting on delinquencies of multifamily. And we don't really focus a lot on multifamily and commercial. So let me just make sure you have all the facts down. Right. And so the chart did show that the expected delinquencies and the current delinquencies for multifamily is starting to go up because of the fact that a lot of those owners, when you buy a multifamily, Freddie Mac is going to do a lot of financing, Fannie and Freddie for those, or ensuring the financing in essence. But the loans, the nature of the loans are short term. They're, 525s, 3-year, that type of thing. And so most of those loans are coming due in environments where the interest rates are higher, and they're worried that the equity situation in a lot of those properties isn't what people were expecting it to be, and they can't refinance it, or they can't make the cash flow work with current rental rates, all things that will lead to defaults. So, hey, opportunity. If you're looking to buy some multifamilies, wait until the second half of the year, because it looks like there's going to be a lot going for sale. So there, I teed you up.
Yes. So everything that you just said highlights the fact that this chart that somebody was posting, trying to make it seem like single family homes were having this crazy spike in foreclosure or pre-foreclosure. Everything you said is true. However, did you also know that even though it is in the multifamily, and in this case, because I looked it up, that the multifamily in this case is 5-family or larger, right? Just so that everybody understands what we're talking about. That's a completely different type of loan. These are not single family mortgages. But all of that even said, only 1% of those are in foreclosure. Did you know that?
Yeah, I know. I didn't know that. That's interesting. But the article, what it did, guys, the reason it's evil is it showed it showed this chart, and then it said single family residential. This was on Twitter and the socials. So someone literally took the chart from Freddie Mac showing the essentially the increasing default rate for multifamilies, and then wrote an article expecting the readers not to pay attention to the chart saying multifamily, and wrote an article that said single family. They were clearly knowingly lying.
Clearly.
And I'm only going to guess that they were doing it because there are so many of these little bridge troll types out there that are feverishly looking for some market reversal, not for the sake that they can sell digital products to agents that are going to essentially be, oh, you got to put your, pay $300 and you can put your name on these REO list companies and all this type of stuff. So if you follow the breadcrumbs, and we have before, you'll see there's different iterations of this misinformation that comes out pretty much on the regular. And it always roots back to like 5 or 6 different guys that are always trying to essentially sell stuff that's not going to be practical, because Julie's about to give us some more statistics, I can tell.
Well, yes, exactly. They're alarmists. They're trying to sell you something. They like the attention that it creates online, all that kind of thing. And related to that, because I did go down that rabbit hole.
Of course you did.
Finding like to what extent this was crazy. The other thing, if you look at, so 2 things. One is if you look at the actual chart, and again, you can find it online, but it's right there on Housing Wire. A lot of them listen to Housing Wire and go there as well. There's a tiny little white bar that says for multifamily. So it does clearly say that, but it's not the headline. You have to use your own brain and look and do your own research. Now, related to this, the other reason that they stated these fear-mongering types that the world might be coming to an end, especially in California, is that there are 4,100 homeowners with mortgages that were affected by the wildfires who are now in default. Now, that may be true. However, did you know that, guess what? There's this thing called forbearances that people discovered during COVID, and there are already set up bank relief programs with Bank of America, Citi, Chase, US Bank, Wells Fargo, all the big guys that offer 90-day forbearance for wildfire affected customers with no late fees and no credit reporting. Some, like Chase, for example, if you have a Chase mortgage, and I'm doing a shout out especially to our California clients, I've got a couple of coaching clients that have been very much affected with their prospects, their leads, their listings. In some cases, Chase has already said that they might extend it 12 months in increments. And Fannie and Freddie have said they will give up to 12 months if their property or their income was impacted. So maybe their property wasn't, but their job was. So Fannie and Freddie said, let's see, no late fees, no foreclosure risk during that period. FHA and HUD have weighed in the same thing. Even the state of California has a new assembly bill that mandates 360 days of forbearance. So there's that. Now, if you are a real estate agent who is selling real estate in these affected areas, or maybe you personally were affected, you do have to apply for all of these things. You do have to actually talk to your lender or advise your clients.
If your house is burned down to forbearance, doesn't mean
you still owe a mortgage.
Yeah, but so what you just the example you're using for people that had wildfires, that's not going to make a hell beans difference, because at the end of the day, there's no house. So
there is potentially missed mortgage payments. What I'm saying is, yes, that's what you're saying is true, which means that no, the world isn't coming to an end because of that.
But you're using that as an example, and you said wildfire. So in case somebody's trying to string these thoughts together, the fact is that these forbearance programs are in place everywhere in the country. That's a point she's trying to make. So why are we talking about all this? It's because basically somebody tried to stir the pot about the real estate market going into some sort of housing crash. And it's a complete lie. That's it. That's the end of the story. And then Julie was starting to get into some details on, the percent of people that are actually in defaults at like a record low.
It's basically nothing.
It's nothing. And even if there were an increase, there's so many programs that the government's offering through Fannie and Freddie that's going to make it so that pretty much even if there were a regionalized housing, crash, there's not going to be a big massive foreclosures. I'll say this, there'll never be another big massive foreclosures, because 90% of all mortgages are controlled by Fannie and Freddie. And if you right now, dear listener, or one of your clients can't make a mortgage payment for whatever reason, like Julie just said, you call up your lender and they'll give you a forbearance. And the fire thing is going to be a completely different can of worms, unfortunately. I have no idea what the resolution to all of that's going to be. But Julie, let's move on. So
Yes.
let's talk next about the stock market. So the tariffs are something that had an adverse effect on the stock market. And if you read mainstream media, all of it's talking about how doom and gloom the stock market is, tariffs bad, orange man bad, just bad, 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 bad. Okay. But here's what's interesting. The 10-year went down, mortgage interest rates went down. The Fed's going to have to lower interest rates themselves. And at the same time, we've seen an uptick, significant uptick in the number of homes for sale. And as the 10-year fell, as mortgage interest rates fall, now all the analysts are predicting that there's going to be an increase in home sales. So before you decide to jump into the deep end of the politicized news, you should be thinking about what truly the full 360 on that bit of information is going to be, because just because there might be an economic slowdown because of tariffs, A, it doesn't last forever, and B, it doesn't affect everyone equally. Julie and I have been married for 34 years this year, and we've been on this planet for combined of 109 years. I don't know how many recessions we've been through. And I'm telling you, the effect of a recession differs depending on you. And you guys are selling real estate, and you are selling real estate, and you will get paid whether the values are going up or whether the values are going down, whether the market is slow, whether the market is hot. You don't just make money when the market's going one direction. Again, go you for having gotten a real estate license. Julie?
Well, that's true. And typically in recessions, the interest rates on mortgages do come down. They're trying to stimulate the economy again. That's good for all of you listening. And keep in mind, too, this year is not exactly like last year. The first quarter started to look like it was going to be suppressed sales again, and it was lower. But there's a major difference that you don't often hear reported, and that is new purchase applications for normal single family, which is what most of our listeners deal with day in and day out. And that was happening even when rates were between 6.5 and 7, which was very different than last year. That was happening with lower inventory. We're starting to get more inventory as we get into the spring market. So if we do go into recession and rates come down even more as they get closer to 6, it's all good news. You've got stuff to sell, the builders are building, and rates are coming down. So in some sense, recession may actually be good for the housing market. Would you agree with that?
Builders are building, and obviously more resales coming for sale. And I believe the single family purchase apps are up 20% year over year.
Yep.
I think
Already.
it was 20%. Yeah. And so do I think a recession is good? As long as, do I think it's good? No, because it's 2 quarters of negative GDP growth. But
good for housing in a sense because of the rates.
Yeah, good for housing, good for individual agents, good for brokers. But if you and I sold in an area, Julie, where, for example, when we were selling in New Albany, there was an area that was a lot of the people that lived in these homes. I forget who built them, but it was basically a new home construction area. And it was a lot of folks that worked at the Rickenbacker Air Force Base after it became like a big distribution hub for most of the East Coast. And Rickenbacker got decommissioned, or I don't remember the whole thing, but essentially that whole entire neighborhood, which was 90% employees that, were living there and working there, they were without jobs. And so they all had to sell their homes, and it wasn't that far away from New Albany. So you had this area that was in a housing depression right next door to a New Albany, effectively, that was a half hour away, that was having a housing boom. So if you're selling in this area where there's a depression or a recession, well, that's not good for you. So the moral of the story is if you are in a market like that and you do start to see an adverse effect that's happening, go to a market, it might be down the road, that's going to be, obviously offer plentiful opportunity. So just because, don't get sucked into the doom and gloom. Don't allow your potential to be politicized or to be controlled by, really whatever the mainstream media is trying to have you believe, or even podcasts and whatever. Do your own homework. That way you can think clearly. Because remember, at the end of the day, I said this a second ago, you're selling something that everybody needs no matter what direction the economy is going. That's pretty incredible because there's not very many other industries like that.
That's true. And be careful of your own confirmation bias as well. So let's say that you were triggered by that crazy chart we just talked about, and you happen to have one seller who bought at the peak in 2022, didn't have a very big down payment, and now finds himself relocated. So they might be not even upside down, but breaking even. So you say to yourself, oh yeah, gosh, I just talked to somebody and yeah, things are just coming unglued. Well, you used a chart that wasn't really portrayed accurately, and you used one thing to convince yourself that all other things are happening in the same way. Now, I'll give you an example. I have a coaching client in Phoenix. she has a combination of a whole bunch of cash deals that are coming together. Some of them, she's got the buyer and she's got the seller. At the same time, there are two pre-foreclosures in this very high-end neighborhood that she sells in. So how can two things be true at the same time? You can have all these people that are selling, they didn't have a mortgage, people are buying that are paying cash, and yet you have these other situations. So you have to take everything as a case-by-case scenario and not try and make these broad forecasts. And I think that because, especially during COVID, the country kind of moved in lockstep, like everybody was having multiple offers, everybody had lack of inventory, there was FOMO everywhere. For 2 or 3 years, we all got used to everything acting the same all the time. And your example about like the base that was changed and people lost their jobs in this town, but not in this town. So adjust accordingly and make sure you're staying on top of your own local facts. Set up your Google alerts, use your AI, read your NAR reports, read your relocation, set that up, know what's being built and what's not being built.
Well, you can have even a really healthy market. Overall, the economy in your local market's fantastic, but
Yeah.
you've got a bunch of, ferocious builders that move in, these big national builders, and every, cornfield around you now becomes a new subdivision. That's going to create a bit of a housing recession for you, despite the fact that everything else is really, unless you're realizing, hey, you know what? I can go make money doing new construction. By the way, listen to our past podcasts and join Premier Coaching to learn more about that. So yeah, I mean, again, what we're trying to impress upon all of you is the importance of just keeping your head clear of all the noise and all the static. Because Julie and I did 3 podcasts on this. If you guys should Google make housing great again. So if you did, the only results that come up are what Julie and I have been the content that we created over the last month. But you should go and listen to those past podcasts, or if you're over on YouTube, listen to them, because I think, very, detailed lay out the reasons why we believe we're in the beginning stages of what's going to be a 25-year housing boom. If you want me to give you the cliff notes for all of it, here it is. We are experiencing a 25-year housing boom because of demographics, because the amount of demand is going to outstrip the supply of homes by a huge margin for a long period of time. That's the easy way to explain it. So if you're selling something that a lot of people need, you're not going to have any worries about your cash flow. And that's the housing industry right there. And we also projected out using AI to figure out, based on the amount of homes that are being built, the amount of homes that have to be built, the number of the increasing demand, all the things. And this is another thing everyone's been saying, and they were so freaking wrong. And Julie and I said this. We've been saying, oh, COVID's going to make, a big mass agent exodus. Oh, this is going to cause a bunch of agents to quit. This is going to cause a bunch of agents to quit. And Julie and I were like, all these people that are predicting there's going to be a bunch of agents leaving the industry haven't been in the industry for very long, or they wouldn't be saying that. Because real estate is, you get a real estate license when the economy is bad to make ends meet. You get a real estate license when the economy is good, because everyone and your friend is buying and selling real estate, and you have FOMO, so you get a license because you want to get into it too, and you want to quit your normal job. In other words, everyone wants to get into real estate at all times. And that's what you see when you go back and look in history. There's not been a major agent exodus, and there's not been all these things that people say, most of which are absolutely 100% wrong. And I still don't know. Maybe they just don't know what they're saying is not true. Truthfully, I think most people, just like that, dumpster fire article we were talking, where the person intentionally tried to mislead people to think that multifamily defaults is going to equal residential defaults. Personally, I think that people a lot of times do it because they're just trying to get attention. They're just desperately trying to get clicks. They're trying to, have people talk about them. Their egos desperately want to feel important. And others of them are then trying to sell some dubious product at the back end of it. Otherwise, I don't know why they're doing it. It's just bizarre to me, honestly.
It's attention mongering. I see it on other social media too, where somebody will post like some crazy speculation because of Trump's tariffs, all the housing market is going to crash. How do you plan on making money? Like, who posts that? I left one last week because I thought it was going to be good, and it acted like it was a mastermind and it had nothing to do with anything good. So anyway, I wanted to give a quick shout out, because you were talking about new construction a minute ago as part of the reason that we're seeing this new 25-year housing boom is that the builders are adding inventory. We're up 12% for the year. And I got a great message. I think she copied you too, from Sue Romans, who says, thanks, Tim and Julie, again, Sue's been a longtime client and listener. So she said, thanks, Tim and Julie. Your current podcast on new construction is spot on. We've been writing and losing in competitive markets offers to purchase with very picky buyers, and they're now under contract for a move-in ready home closing in 24 days. Buyers are getting 1% less interest rate. They're going to close at 5.99% fixed for 30 years. And the builder is paying the remainder of their lease. That's something to negotiate. Isn't that interesting? 10 months of lease that they got baked in. We are a protected full buyer commission plus transaction fee. Our buyers are thrilled. Oh, and the home was not on the MLS. So that's kind of
Wow.
textbook podcast from last week, right? She says, keep up the practical, tactical coaching. We're putting it into action here in Wisconsin. So thank you for that, Sue.
Yeah. And, we get, by the way, Sue, we love you. We love your daughter. Thank you for being such loyal clients and podcast listeners and supporters of Julie and I's art and science project that we've been doing for decades, known as coaching. Yes. And thank you for all, we get a lot of really positive, wonderful comments that we don't say publicly, thank you, but we always respond privately. If you ever want to send Julie and I a message or give us a show idea or suggestion, you can do it one of two ways. You can just go over to Instagram and direct message us, or you can text me at 512-758-0206. 512-758-0206. All right, Julie, I'm trying to keep the pacing up here so we can cover a lot of ground because there's a lot of topics we're going to talk about.
Sure.
By the way, do you remember we talked about last night when we were talking about the effect of why essentially influence versus people.
When we're talking about podcasts?
No. When we were talking last night about people, well, I guess we're going to talk about it. All right. So evolutionarily, okay, for the longest period of times, humans were we were nomadic. And so remember now, so we are only able to basically, we weren't wealth gatherers. We weren't buying, because we were nomadic, we were going from one place to the other, following the weather, following the herds, doing what, people do. And so the only possessions we had were the possessions that were on our backs. The only possessions we had were the things we could carry. So during a vast majority of all human existence, we were hunter-gatherers, and we were not looking to amass material things. Let's just leave it at that. I'm sure that, more status, you had maybe the bigger fur coat you were allowed to have, or
cooler
whatever.
Cave,
Exactly. The cooler cave. But, the thing I came across, which I thought was really fascinating, was that if you think about, and this is a question that you and I have asked forever, but I never ever was able to close the loop on it. Now I am. It was years ago. I was on a, what was it? Clubhouse. And I asked the question, if you had to choose between being rich and being famous, what would you choose? And I want you listeners to go through this thought process yourself. If you have to choose between being rich and being famous, and what would you choose? Now, I've asked that question of podcast listeners and coaching clients for a long time because it is fascinating. But what happened next was something I'll never forget. There was a guy that chimed in, and he had a high level of familiarity with us. I think I knew who he was. I'm not sure. I'm guessing by his voice and that he was probably in his 60s or his 70s, and his references too. When I tell you guys the story, you'll understand. So he then started to tell all the listeners, and there was probably 700 or 800 people in this clubhouse, how his whole life story. He said, in my 20s, and he had sold real estate the whole time. He said, in my 20s, he said, and he's in retrospect, looking back, and I wanted to be famous. He said, I wouldn't have framed it like that, but that's what I did. And here's what I did. And he rattled off all the things he did. He had a moving truck. He had bus benches. He spent all of what would have been his profit to basically become more famous. And he said, what was mad, and this is him saying this. This isn't me interpreting what he's saying, right? I'm trying to remember this exactly like he described it, or exactly like he told his story. So he said, when I was younger, I wanted to be famous. And he said, I spent all of my money. And he said, that was when I was in my 20s. It was all about recognition. It was all about, people knowing who I was. It was very important to me. And he said, as I got into my 30s, I felt the same way. But he said, as I got into my mid 30s, my late 30s, I started to feel a different way. And it's so fascinating. I'm literally hearing his voice in my head. And then he said, as I got into my 40s, I started regretting my behavior from 20 years prior when I wanted to be famous. And then he said, now then he talked about his 50, then he like fast forward it. And then in my 50s, I definitely regretted ever having sought fame. And then, then he didn't say what his age was, but this is the reason I think he was in his 60s or 70s. And then he said, now I wish I would have focused on being rich. And so you guys see what he said? And then we talked about it. And so I know that was a thing, and you can see it societally. And I remember when Julie and I were in our 20s, though fortunately we had our heads relatively screwed on straight, we were buying rental properties. But we got tempted by wanting recognition. Like, I'll tell you guys from a personal perspective. In our first year, we sold 100 houses, and we had all kinds of attention that we'd never experienced before in our lives. Just all kinds of things happen. We were on covers of magazines. Remax that was having us go to different regions. We were doing public speaking, all these things. Remember, prior to us getting in real estate, we were in college. I had a car cleaning and detailing business. Julie helped me in the car cleaning and detailing business, but she also was a full-time elf at a
As a professional Christmas elf.
She was a professional Christmas elf at a year-round Christmas store. She didn't wear the whole elf outfit, but I mean, she was a full-time elf. Okay, so that was our background, right? So
Right.
Then we get into real estate. We sold over 100 houses, and then, I mean, trust me, no one was more surprised than we were. And we did it
And
one.
we did still look like we were 12, you especially.
Thanks. It's true. Anyway, so so that happened. And our second year, we then started getting all this attention that we'd never had before. And it was overwhelming. I remember, going in front of these groups of agents when Julie and I were at that age I told you our backgrounds, and thinking, am I really this, wow, I love this feeling. I've never had this. I've never was a sports star, an academic star, or anything like that. But here, okay. So we started getting seduced by wanting to be famous, and it happened in our early 20s. And then we still stayed on track for our second year. We sold more homes. We started to buy rental properties. But by the third year, the fame monster had grabbed both of us by the wedding vegetables and was swinging us around. And then Julie and I were not just seeking out to be famous locally, but nationally. And then we started literally telling ourselves dumb things like, the more famous you are, the more opportunities you create. Well, there's some truth to that, but the more opportunities don't necessarily result in you making more money. So you can be super famous on social nowadays, for example, and there was no social media then, kids. And it doesn't mean anything. Like right now, guys, if you have a video on YouTube that has 1 million views, you make like $3,500. I mean, that's it. So the idea that being more famous is going to make you rich is a complete lie. Remember the guy?
But that's what makes people say famous, because consciously or subconsciously, they think that famous equals rich.
No, I don't believe that's true. I used to believe that. I don't believe it's true anymore.
I'm with you at this stage. That's different than when you're in your 20s and you're doing the famous thing.
Well, so when you're in your 20s and you're trying to seek fame, what there is you're paying homage to your physiology and your, I think, evolutionary biology that goes back to being a hunter-gatherer. Because remember, when you were younger, in human evolution, when you are going from one field to the other, chasing the bison or whatever the hell you were doing, thousands of years ago, and you were your material items or whatever you could carry on your back, the way you gained status inside the tribe that you were amongst was from your status as an influencer, a tribal influencer, your ability to tell stories, your ability to garner attention, how you looked, how you walked, how you hunted, all those things. And the attention you had with inside your little tribal community is what gave you probably status that then would bring you more mating opportunities, would bring you the better cave, would bring you, these things. So I think it is very fascinating. And I say this from someone who's done hundreds of thousands of coaching calls, that younger people do struggle. And I understand, because we did too, without knowing it, do struggle with this innate desire to be famous, to be an influencer is what they call it nowadays. Without really knowing what you're compromising. And so if you were to ask the question of yourself, if you're in the 20s, if I had to choose between being famous or being rich, and you say rich, you're probably lying to yourself. And how would I know you're lying to yourself? Based on what you do with your money. So if you right now are saying, and I've done this experiment, and if I were to ask someone in their 20s, they'll say, I want to be rich. And then, our definition of rich is where your money works for you. You no longer have to work for your money. And I'd say, so give me an example of what are you doing with your money? Like, tell me how many houses you sold, how much money have you made, how much savings have you had? By the way, the savings question is always the truth bearer as to where your focus is. So somebody who's focused on being famous, when you figure out how to earn money consistently in real estate, if you're not saving money consistently, like we teach you in our Premier Coaching Premier Coaching, program, it's because you're spending all of your money on things that you think will make you famous and bring you more influence, because you have not realized that the older version of you is going to wish you would have chosen to be rich over being famous. Because as you grow older, you mature. I don't know if that's the right word, but you want fame less and less. You need recognition less and less. And like what I was saying with the closed loop, I couldn't quite understand why evolutionarily, why there was this innate desire in all of us when we were younger to be famous, and as we grow older, it definitely wanes. And I think the nomadic aspect of it is the only explanation I can come up with. But how do you guys make this practical for you? You got to be making a damn decision. That's the bottom line. You have to decide right now that the businesses that you're building are going to be based on profit, not just based on more sales volume, not based on more sales units, not based on becoming more famous, because the fame doesn't pay the bills. The fame doesn't, might get recognized. You might have 1 billion followers and all the rest of it, but it doesn't mean you can monetize it. And the older you get, the less you'll find that attractive, and the more you'll wish you would have been building a business around that profit. You think, well, the more famous I am, the more leads I'll generate. Like, Julie, you and I've done this a million times. You will have a conversation with somebody, and and this is somebody who's marketing based, they're passive lead generation based. So what are you planning on doing? I'm going to do all this marketing, all this advertising. I'm going to do all this, da, da, da. So what are you trying to accomplish? Well, I want to be an influencer. Or they won't say it like that. They'll say, well, I want to be, the most dumb, if they're, being honest, I want to be the most recognized agent in my marketplace. I want to be the mayor of my town, and whatever it is. Okay, well, why? You keep on asking questions, right? And then they'll say, well, I want to, I think that should generate leads for me. Oh, okay. So you're going through all this, spending all this money. You're gambling that all this fame seeking, influence seeking, whatever the hell you want to call it, is going to generate leads for you. That's what you're after? Okay, good. So why do you want leads? And they're going to say, well, leads, duh, Tim, don't you know? Leads are where the transactions come from. Okay, so what you're saying is you're doing all of this because you want to do real estate transactions, you want to make money. Is that true? Well, yeah, why the hell's what I do all this? Okay, so if you're just after doing real estate transactions and helping people making money and building a business that has a high net profit margin, why don't you just go directly after expired listings? Huh? Why don't you call the people that already have their hands in their air in their marketplace saying, hello, I want to sell my house. Why are you going through all these added steps and trying to become this influencer, trying to do all this stuff? Why don't you just literally go after the people in your marketplace? In every single marketplace, there's thousands of expired sellers. And just as an example, right? We teach you guys 20 different ways, 20 different sources of free leads to go after. And why don't you just call them? Why don't you just proactively lead generate? I mean, I just don't understand. I mean, you think like, well, I'm going to do all this passive lead generation. It's going to build this big cacophony of lead generation for me that's going to go into the future and all this. People have been saying this forever. To what ends? Well, I want to create leads. To what ends? Well, I want to call them because I want them to call me, because when they call me, I have to work less hard, and they already know me and they have this high level of familiarity with me. Okay, it's to what ends? Well, I want to do real estate transactions. Oh, so you want to do real estate transactions? Why don't you just call the people that have their hands in the air saying they want to do real estate deals? Why are you going through all these filtering? Why are you doing all this work? Well, don't I have to be famous to do real estate transactions? No. And here's the thing. The older you get, the more you'll realize this. And it's a Charlie Munger quote. It's so true. Don't try to be famous yourself. Try to make your work famous. So like I was thinking, how do I explain that? Because I was thinking about talking with you guys about this last night when I was talking to Julie. And I was thinking, well, if you're like, for example, let's just say you're a really, really good heart surgeon, and you're the best heart surgeon in the world. Julie, do you remember the heart surgeon that we used to have as a detail customer in Columbus? Charlie was his first name. I don't remember his last name.
I can't remember his last name right now either, but I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. So he was, I remember, he just called me up. He had an NSX, an original NSX.
I remember. Yep.
Yeah. And he had an NSX. He wanted me to take care of it for him. And I did. This is back when I was like in high school and into college. And I did. I don't remember his last name though. He just had me call him Charlie. But I remember telling other doctors, I'm doing, there's this doctor named Charlie. I guess he's a heart surgeon. He's got, oh, you're detailing cars for Charlie. He's like, and people started telling me how famous this guy was as a heart surgeon. But I remembered that he was famous for the work he was doing as a heart surgeon. He wasn't famous as an individual or a person. And matter of fact, he wanted to be he didn't want people to, he had this big property he didn't want a bunch of neighbors. He wanted to be left alone. So he's an example. He wasn't trying to be famous himself. He was trying to make his work famous. And Charlie Munger says, don't seek fame for your business. Make your work, the results you get for other, that's famous. So you go and do business with him because he's going to do a great job as a heart surgeon. You don't do business with him because he's famous, right? Now you're thinking, well, that kind of sounds confusing. It doesn't, because what he sought was becoming the best heart surgeon he possibly could. He wasn't seeking being famous. It's a different pathway. So he was playing a different game. Like when Julie and I, we're doing our best to help you guys understand, is everybody else wants you to play a game of seeking fame and seeking influence. We want you to play a game of building a business that you'll be proud of for decades to come, generations to come, that produces lots of net profit so you can be rich where your money works for you and you no longer have to work for your money. We're teaching you, hopefully, a different game than what everybody else is teaching. Julie, does that all this make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I was researching something. There's actually a Bible verse that says, therefore, encourage one another and build each other up, just as the fact that you are doing. And this, I don't have the exact, let me get back to the Zoom here. I don't have the exact part. There was something that said, and I'm not great at chapter and verse Bible. I'm working on that. But there's something it sounds something like, if you're doing it for yourself, you're aspirational. But if you're doing it for others, like doing good work, you're inspirational. And that's how you know if you're doing good work, is that your North Star is the work, not yourself.
Yeah, that's good. And it is, so now with that said, Julie, I'd like to move topics and talk about podcasting.
Sure.
Is this a good time in your mind?
Yeah. I mean, I always go to like tactical, practical. What should somebody do with that big conversation?
I'm about to talk. That's the reason I'm going to go.
Sure.
Okay. So if you guys aren't listening, there's a great podcast called All In. I'm not going to say it's one of my top 10, probably
it's
10
called
now.
The All In Podcast. Yep.
The All In Podcast. But they had a midweek podcast about podcasting last week, and I thought was kind of interesting. And so I'm going to tie some things together based on what I just said. And then Julie and I are going to talk about podcasting. So we do believe that all of you guys should have a podcast. And we do believe, now you're saying, Tim, what the hell are you talking about? That's passive lead generation, because here's why. Here's what you should do. And I'm going to give you the exact recipe for it. And we talked about this a lot. And if I forget any of the steps, Julie, make sure you tell me, okay?
Sure.
All right. We think all of you should start a podcast urgently. And I'm going to give you the steps. So write this down. Number one, you should name your podcast. You should micro focus your podcast on your particular neighborhood or community. If you go too big, it's not going to have the same power. You'll understand when I drill down. So like if Julie and I were still in New Albany, Ohio, and we are in the New Albany, Ohio Country Club, New Albany, Ohio, big, New Albany Country Club, small. If we are starting a podcast, we would do New Albany Country Club, not New Albany, Ohio. Because what we want is we want to have a very small niche that we could build a moat around and become the go-to podcast for people that are aspirationally want to live there or people that already live there. That's what we would do. You guys should think about doing the same thing. So choose a community where the sale price is high. Choose a community where the transactional volume is high. Move-ins, move-outs, people moving up, people moving down. Don't choose some area with essentially there's
nobody cares
people
about.
Stay forever. Exactly. Make sure you're choosing a neighborhood that's not becoming passe. Neighborhood communities become passe. It could become passe because the architectural style, because just all these things. So choose wisely, number one. Number two, like when you're getting it started, I'm not going to tell you guys our name for the podcast that we're thinking about doing, but yeah, I will. What the hell? So we are actually thinking about experimenting with this. And the first time that Julie and I pulled up to the gates of the community that we live in. And remember, we're poor people from Ohio. So just keep this in mind when you think I'm bragging. I am not. I'm just telling a story. So we live at a Ritz-Carlton community in Dorado, Puerto Rico. Just saying it still makes me blush, even though we've lived here for 6 years.
Exactly.
It's true. It does. I'm blushing. All right. So we moved here, and I remember it was a perilous journey to get here, but just literally, but months of research and work and effort and
planning and moving and packing and all that.
Exactly. We had to sell our cows. I mean, we were in Austin. We had to sell 2 cows and our chickens and
All the chickens.
all the chickens. Yeah. And we pull up to the gates of the Ritz-Carlton in Dorado, Puerto Rico. And the first thing we hear it say is, it's Nav. So, but just remember this, you guys can use this idea too. You have arrived. Welcome to the Ritz-Carlton, Puerto Rico. I mean, that's what Nav said because we just arrived, we, driven there. And so I thought a great name, Julie and I thought a great name for a podcast would be you have arrived, welcome to, and then pick your community. Okay. So I'm giving you guys that idea. Do with it as you will. All right. So how are you going to come up with, so what's the format of your podcast? The frequency matters. So you want to do it. I'll get into the technical aspects. It's way easier than you guys think. You get yourself a simple mic. You use Zoom. You use the camera on your computer. You use a headset so you can listen, everything. Not expensive. None of this stuff is expensive. If you guys are interested, Julie and I'll post links. Use Zoom. The video quality is not the best, but it's going to be as best as it needs to be. So just remembering, passing all this along. Now, how are you going to do this? I started out today's show telling you guys, giving you a suggestion, knowing that we are going to talk about this, that when we do these Friday shows in particular, we want you to feel like you're sitting around a table with us and you're participating in a conversation. If you've been listening to podcasts for a long period of time, like Julie and I have, you'll notice that the best podcasts are the ones that are the least formal. So if you think podcasts have to have perfect lights and perfect video and perfect, it doesn't. Podcasting now is transforming the way that information is being disseminated in more meaningful ways than truthfully I ever would have possibly imagined. And anything and I want you to think about what I'm saying, the media sources that have proven out to be the least trustworthy are the ones that are the most formally presented. So the old 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s style of somebody sitting there with a tie on in front of a perfect set with all this shit, people sort of, I think, have learned not to trust those sources of information, no matter what side of the political aisle you're on. Subconsciously, people are rejecting those sources, or at least taking them with a grain of salt. At least I think people under 60 or maybe even 50 are now being very skeptical about those more traditional sources of media. Okay. And so people are finding that if you're listening to a podcast, and Julie and I listen to podcasts all the time, a lot of you guys do too, or watching a podcast on YouTube or whatever, that the podcasts that are the least formal, I mean, look how we're dressed, are the ones that people are listening to the most, and the ones that are also the least polished, like Julie keeps on going off camera to clear her throat. Those two, I mean, we don't do any edits of our podcast. You guys probably know that. If there's a dog that's going to bark, I just heard a leaf blower. If a kid screams, it's going to be on the podcast. People love that. And so I'm giving you permission not to overly worried about the quality of your presentation. This is the reason I'm telling you this. All right. How do you come up with topics? You're going to go to ChatGPT or Grok, and you're going to ask it to research to find out if they have a ChatGPT or Grok or both do this research for you. You're going to, here, I'm just going to give you the overarching ideas. You're going to want to ask it, what are the topic? Okay. So first of all, form an avatar or form your ideal listener. How do you know what your ideal listener is you're going to want to define what the neighborhood looks like. So if you're selling in New Albany, Ohio, I can tell you the average age. I can tell you the average education level. I can tell you how many hours they work a week, how many kids they have on average, the whole thing. You want to gather all this information. You want to feed it to AI, and you want to have AI make for you it's not really an avatar. It's basically your target customer, your target listener, because you want to always have that benchmark of who you're creating your content for. And then you, again, use Grok or AI chat, and then ask it, okay, so let's say you create these ideal customers, man and a woman, married, have 2.5 kids, have a golden retriever, whatever it is, and they live in New Albany, Ohio. Okay, where are they? And then you need to build out, what are their fears? What are their aspirations? What are they worried about? What do they talk about at night? Ask it, the AI, all these questions. What do they listen to? What do they watch? What are their favorite movies? Where do they vacation? What are they aspirational for? What kind of cars do they drive? You want to have, and you'll know this because you live in this community and you're probably like all these people as well. But what I'm trying to get you to do is really have the AI start learning, you're learning and it's learning who your potential podcast listener is going to be. So you're going to define all of this, and then you're going to then After you have this perfect profile of who you're targeting, then you're going to ask the AI. Now it knows your community, it knows your customer, your ideal listener, and then you're going to ask it to come up with, based on its research it's already done. You couldn't have done this 12 months ago because there was no AI, but now you can. What are those? What should be my top? What should be my first 10 podcasts be about? I want my podcast to be 30 minutes. I want it to be, maybe it's just you talking, or maybe it's you and somebody else. It doesn't matter. And maybe it's going to be you interviewing somebody, whatever. Ask it what, based on the profile that it just built for your target listener, ask it what it thinks you should be doing the podcast on. And it'll give you great topics. And then you say, okay, and then you have to tell it what to do. Okay, really drill down on these topics. And I want you to research based on the podcast that you told me that my target listener is also going to be listening to, and the views and the videos and the movies and whatever. I want you to tell me, based on what you know, their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations, their fears. I want you to tell me what the topics should be. And then I want you to go in there and research what the real estate market's like. Because don't make your podcast all about real estate. No one wants to hear all about real estate. Divide it into 12, maybe 4 sections. The first is going to be highlights from the community. The second, you and AI create the outline for every one of your podcasts. And then have it define what the topics are that it has now determined. I feel bad calling it, Julie. Honestly, isn't that weird?
I know.
So, but have it then write the outlines, it give you the topic ideas, and then you have 10 podcast outlines and descriptions made. And if you don't like them, go back and say, you can do better, do more research on this. And it's going to give you all the things that you're worried about. It's going to talk about the fact that your target customer wants to go to Italy, your target customer. So you want to talk about European travel, maybe a little bit. You want to interview somebody that just got back to Italy. It'll give you ideas. It gets the juices flowing. All right. You guys with me on this? So you have AI that's going to be able to do this level of market research that you never in a billion years would have been able to accomplish on your own. Next, how do you actually set it up? Now, this is where I know the rubber's going to meet the road, and a lot of you guys are going to get frustrated because it's going to seem like it's overly complicated for you to actually do this. So what I want you to do is I want you to go to, is it WeWork, Julie? Or is it so. Upwork? Upwork or
I think
WeWork?
It's Upwork.
And look and put a posting there for somebody to be your podcast manager. And what you're going to want it to do, and the AI that's on the job posting platform will help you write the description, but you're going to have it write, is it Upwork? I think it's Upwork.
It's Upwork. Yeah, WeWork is something else.
Yeah, WeWork is that shared job thing or shared office space. All right. Yeah. So Upwork, and then go in there and it'll ask you questions and say, I'm looking for someone to help me set up a podcast. You'll have to ask AI, by the way, I need to get this podcast started. I need to write a job description for a person to manage all this, set up everything for me. I don't know anything about what I'm doing. Please write a complete checklist of what needs to happen. Ask Grok or Chat GPT. It'll create a list. And then when you're writing the job description in WeWork, Upwork, whatever it was, and just post that there. And then you'll have people that will bid on the job and help you set it up and give you pricing and all that. Yes, go ahead.
How expensive would you estimate that type of job to be?
You probably could get all this set up for maybe $200, maybe even cheap. Less. Yeah,
cheap for somebody professional to do a good job for you.
Yeah, and then what you do is you're going to want to. They're going to set up and I'm going to give you guys I did this for a new podcast that I started that has nothing to do with real estate. And I'm giving you guys can copy it. So then what you're going to do is you're going to once your YouTube and your iTunes and your Spotify and your your X and all the social profiles are set up, because your podcast is going to need social profiles everywhere. And then someone will set all of this for you. You don't have to do it yourself. I didn't do it myself. I told you how I did it. Copy what I did. And then you're going to have the thumbnail art created. And again, I'm about to give you guys an example of what I did a month ago, and I'll tell you what it came as a result. So then you have to pre-record 4 shows, maybe 6 shows. So when the podcast goes live on YouTube, on Stitcher, on Spotify, all these other places, my alarm's going off reminding me I have a Zoom in 15 minutes, that you're going to have 6 shows at the ready. So you're going to launch with 6 shows. And then you're going to basically release it to the wilds. And then what you do is you're going to target market into your community, New Albany, Ohio Country Club. Remember, we were talking about niching it. And then you're going to start target marketing it and get people to start talking about it. And how are you going to do that? You could get the list of everyone that lives in the community, and you could, market to them on Facebook. You could do a flyer, announcing a new, we have arrived, New Albany, Ohio Country Club. And then, or you have arrived, and then do a flyer campaign, do anything and everything. Let all your centers of influence and past clients know about it. And then what you can really do to supercharge it is do interview people that are influential in your community. Avoid politicians, but maybe it's the new construction rep. Maybe it's the famous bakery owner. Maybe it's the candlestick maker. You guys get the point? All right. So here's what Julie and I did. About a month ago, actually about 60 days ago, I started a podcast called Full Throttle Talk, and you guys can check this out. Everything I just told you about, I did. So look it up. If you're a car nerd, this is a perfect podcast for you. So Full Throttle Talk. And as of yesterday, there's 5 million podcasts in the world. So as of yesterday, Full Throttle Talk was 43 in the automotive section, which has probably 200,000 or 300,000 podcasts that we're competing with. And it was 43. And I had no high level of mastery of, doing an automotive related podcast. The two guys that I have that are doing the podcast with me, I'm friends with one, sort of friends with another one. So we are kind of strangers, but if you guys can listen to what we did, and it's really taken off. And we have had over 60,000 views on Instagram. The podcast itself has had 2,000 downloads. It's just an astronomically huge surprise to me. But how did we do it? Because we did everything the way I just laid it out for you, and we released everything at once. And we knew that we would get, we knew there was the TAM, the total addressable market, was big because there's a lot of car enthusiasts around the world. I underestimated how big it was, but then we gave them, 4 shows to start, and we've been doing a show consistently every single week. And the listenership and the downloads and the views have just consistently gone up. Now, we're not monetizing it. I'm not trying to make money from it. I doubt if I'll ever want to make money from it. It's just a passion project. But really was an experiment to see if I could create something that I could then share with you guys, so then you could create it in your own real estate markets, which you can. We were thinking about doing a formalized product around what I just said, but I just kind of gave you the framework for it. And really the cheat code is just listen to this again and then go to, WeWork and hire someone that really knows all the mechanics of it. I don't know the mechanics of it. You asked me how to link up to iTunes. I got no idea. Now, how does this loop back to the famous versus rich thing? Because ultimately, what a podcast does, if you do it the way I prescribed, which is you in your real authentic voice, like it makes me laugh inside when someone says, you guys are just like you are on your podcast.
Right.
What? Okay. What'd you expect us to be?
Exactly.
That's what you should be. Just be yourself, being yourself. Because what will happen is over time, like I can tell you, coaching clients, our best coaching clients are the ones that have been listening to us for the podcast for the longest period of time.
Always. Yeah.
And because they know what we're all about. They have been sitting around this table with us mentally and emotionally for thousands of podcasts, hopefully not that many before they decide to join Premier Coaching. Hopefully it's more like 3 or 4. But in some cases, I've had people that said they've listened to us for years before they joined coaching because they were maybe experimenting with some other things or trying to decide how serious they wanted to be, or whatever their excuse was. But that's what it is. So what a podcast should do is create a sense of community where you're talking about things that your target is already interested in. And then when you do meet them, when you do call them because they're an expired listing or whatever, meet them at the gym, they already know you because you've been being yourself on the podcast. And that makes your job so much easier. That is different than doing marketing, advertising, and branding. That is different than a tsunami of TikTok videos of you eating your lunch or you doing some, crazy dance, because what you've done is you've gone to the next level. So like as a rule, one podcast listener is worth like 100 YouTube views. On one podcast download is worth like 100 YouTube views. It's worth like 500 Instagram views. It's worth like 1,000 TikTok views. So but those other things funnel those people back to listening to podcasts. So on Full Throttle Talk, we've had like 2,000 downloads, but I promise you, those 2,000 people are loyal and they're going to be listening back.
And that's after only what, 8 shows, I think, something like that. 4 to start, and then maybe 4 to 6 that you've done.
Yeah, 8 or 9. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's just extraordinary. But we launched with the podcast being fully syndicated on all the different platforms. And we launched, and I didn't know whether people would like the content. I like doing it. It was fun talking about what I like to talk about, car nerd shit. And I did it with 2 guys that were, they're not professional podcasters, so they had to find their groove. But ultimately where this all goes is that if you are in a real estate market where you're really trying to be in alignment with your highest and truest purpose, which is being a service to other people, in this particular example, people that are wanting to buy or sell real estate, you're going to insulate yourself, build a moat around yourself that nobody else that's trying to do direct mail or doing all this little, kitschy stuff as far as marketing goes, because people feel like they know you. And Julie, I want you to really drill down on this. This is, I know a fire hose them, but we only had an hour today. So make sure I get these numbers right. Okay. When you guys are looking to hire a professional, can you go through it or you want me to do it?
Well, it's the people have done these surveys and it's always the same results. If you are looking for somebody to provide a service, in most of our listeners' case, that's buying or selling real estate. But let's just make it finding a vet for your dog. You are first going to go to, who do I already know? Excuse me. That's, sorry, about 85% of the time. Sometimes it comes at 83 to 85% of the time. Who do I already know? Oh, I've taken my other dogs to this vet. I'm going to take them there. Only if you don't already know somebody, what are you going to do next? And that's another roughly 10% of the time. It's always like 9 or 10% of the time. I'm going to ask a trusted friend or advisor. I'm going to go, my best friend's got a dog. Who does she take her dog to? Okay. Trusted friend or advisor, you're going to get a referral. Only at that last 5 or 6% that's left, would you even consider responding to a postcard, an ad, a video, something that pops up on your screen? And even then, you're probably going to look at, if you go to that resort because your friend doesn't have any, maybe they hate their vet, so you're not going to use that referral. I'm going to go there, but I'm probably going to look at 3 or 4 of those things. I'm not even just going to respond to that one postcard. So in other words, you better be the person that they already know, love, and trust, or that their trusted friend or advisor knows, loves, and trusts, because you're not going to get it from a random marketing, advertising, or branding. Is that
so
what you
less than 10,
talk about?
Yep, you did. And thank you. Less than 10% of all the folks out there that are going to do business with you are going to do it as a result of any kind of marketing and advertising and branding. And guys, the word branding and advertising, they're conflated. People are trying to say, oh no, branding's not marketing, or branding's not advertising. It's something completely different. It's how the people think, or how they feel when they think of you. Okay, what? Okay, so here's the reason it's advertising, because if you stop doing your branding, i.e. paying for ads on social media, your leads will stop, because it was really advertising at the end of the day. What you're really saying is that you're trying to have a reputation or a relationship with that person. That's what your branding's supposed to be doing, but it doesn't really work that way. That's the reason that we're suggesting that all of you do podcasts. And how do you actually get benefit from that, other than the fact that people don't worry about getting direct benefit from it, but you do and can suggest that if anybody's looking forward to know what the home is worth in this market, that you'd be more than happy to do a CMA, and just lightly put it out there.
That's right. And remember too, that when somebody goes to your podcast, they're very clearly listening to your podcast because they want to listen to you. They want to listen to what you have to say. If I go to TikTok or Instagram, I might just want 5 minutes of entertainment and watch cat videos. I mean, I learned this morning that otters have a little pocket under their armpit where they keep a rock. Sometimes they keep that rock their entire lives. Why? Because they use that to crack open oysters. They want to always have it. Great oyster comes by, you don't want to have to search for a rock. I learned that from Instagram, okay? I wasn't looking for, I just wanted, you just pass by. When somebody goes to a podcast, if they listen to our real estate podcast, which is about real estate 4 out of 5 days of the week, we warned you this was Friday, then you're going to get hopefully at least one actionable, practical, tactical thing that will change your business this week. You're going there for that purpose versus randomly seeing somebody's branding walk by.
But what we're hoping they understand is that when people are going to listen to your podcast, you cannot make it Julie Harris Realtor. You cannot make it Julie Harris Real Estate Show.
Value.
You have to, don't even make it anything about real estate. it's presented, the host is, but don't make it about, because you're only going to attract it. And people have these preconceived notions about what they're going to hear if it's a real estate podcast. So make it about the community.
You hear like what's happening in your community. What's being built in that big field that I keep on passing by, and there's no sign, but there's all this equipment. What's going on with that? What are the best restaurants? Where, I was searching for Dorado, what people who live here search for. It's how bad are the hurricanes? Because, the news has made it sound like we're flattened all the time. How about are the hurricanes? What are the best restaurants? Golf was a big one. And homes for sale and leases. Those are the top.
You'll know what people are interested in. You don't even have to guess by doing the research through AI, and have AI do all the research for you.
For free.
For free. Right, exactly. And the only way you'd ever get this information is really trial and error. And most people can't last the amount of time it would take to trial and error out what the listeners would want to listen to. But if you did that and you just put the word out, and people knew your podcast was a place where they could go and feel like they're having a safe conversation, where they weren't going to get hammered over the head with, some real estate spiel, that you're going to not have commission breath, they're going to go back and they're going to listen. You're going to start forming a community. That way, when you come across, so going back to the statistics thing, so if someone's thinking about putting their house for sale, they're going to say, well, who do I already know that I've used in the past? That's going to be you, because they feel like they already know you from your podcast. That's not going to be you because they feel like they know you from your Instagram thing. That's a different type of relationship. And that's what's happening in social media that nobody is talking about. That's the reason that podcasting is accelerating away from all other forms of social media, if it is social media, because it is a carve out for high quality potential customers for you that you're not going to get for someone looking for an otter with a rock under their armpit type content, right? Or the cat videos. You guys get the difference?
They're going to go to a podcast about your community because they're invested in the community. They're interested in the community. They want to know what's going on.
They've self-selected.
Yes,
and
that's the point I was trying to make.
For them to listen long form to something, they've already determined that they like you, they like the content. And again, break it up, have AI help you, but break up your podcast into maybe 4 sections, not more than that, maybe only 3 sections. And then make one of the sections about real estate. Make it a safe place where they don't feel like they're going to get, like I said, no commission breath on your podcast. If you don't want to do your podcast by yourself, don't choose a mortgage or title, because they might have a different mission. They're going to try to get mortgage and title business. Maybe choose someone who's in charge of the PTA. Maybe have like the easiest podcasts to do, and they're also the hardest podcasts to do. Personally, I wouldn't do what I'm about to say, but some of you might want to, is just do interview podcasts. The reason I don't like interview podcasts doing them is because you're making the guest the focus, and you're not building a relationship with your viewer, your listeners, like what we're trying to get you guys to understand. So if you can find somebody that you are already, how about this? Who's your friend in your neighborhood? Assuming you want to target your neighborhood, who's somebody that lives there that has a great personality? Maybe they never broadcasted before, but they tell great stories and they're fun to be around, and they have social influence themselves. Maybe maybe by accident they have social influence. Have that person as your co-host. It doesn't even have to be your co-host all the time. They can just be sporadically. This is up for you guys to create. But what we're here to express to you is there was, without a doubt, podcasting. We're just at the beginning stages of podcasting exploding. And I'm going to share this with you, and then I got to go. Is podcasting also is not going to be relegated to the trash heap of ideas that were great yesterday, that AI is going to quickly create with all of their forms of social media posts, social media videos, so short videos, reels, all the things. Those are going to be created, simulated at AI at a very high level. But podcasting, like what we're talking about, is not. So if you find your voice on podcasting, which all of you can, just pretend you're talking to your friends, you will find a ready, willing audience of people that will happily do business with you. And then when they think of doing a real estate deal, they're going to think of you. When you call them because it's an expired listing, they're going to think of you. You guys get it? We've just given you in an hour, I think, a lot of random thoughts, but those of you who are ready for the lesson, you're our people, we're your people. Do something with this information. So Julie, that's the wrap. I got to go to another Zoom.
Yep, I know. All right, good.
All right.
Happy weekend, everybody.
God bless you guys. Have a great weekend. We'll talk with you on Monday.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.